Hey guys, let's talk about books. Alright, you guys know the drill. This is 5 books that I read recently and I want to tell you about it because no one else in my life will listen. First up, Franz Kafka's The Trial. This was published in 1925. Well, the English translation was published in 1925. It was translated by Idris Parry from the German? Must be German. I read this because someone on a podcast I was listening to picked this up and said it was weird and hard and surreal, and I thought, yeah, I could give that a go. Subsequently, they DNF'd the book, but I persevered, and when I was finished, I literally stomped on it. I was so mad. It was a slog, and it's supposed to be a slog. The story of the trial is a guy called Joseph K. wakes up on his 30th birthday and he's being arrested. And nobody will tell him why he's arrested or what the process is or what's going on. He's just arrested. He's held at his house for a couple of hours and then he's escorted to work and he goes to work and he lives a normal day and then it just continues. And so that's weird and surreal. And then Joseph K., he just does his life. He goes to work, but he's becoming increasingly paranoid about his case and the arrest, and is he going to go to trial, like what is happening, and nobody will give him any answers. So he feels very blasé about the whole thing, but everyone around him is super concerned about this arrest and what is he going to do, and does he have an advocate, and will he talk to the judge, and will he front up to these places that he needs to be to further his case. And the more that happens, the more he feels like, well, shit, maybe he should be giving a shit about this case, but also what can he do? And nothing seems to be happening. He gets an advocate and the advocate seems to be doing nothing. He talks to other people on the side and they say, you have to take this route and do that. And he tries that and nothing happens. And all the time he's becoming more and more paranoid and his work is becoming more and more neglected and his personal life is a shambles. And I'm not going to tell you what happens in the end, but it finishes on his 31st birthday. And it is just a book. It is a journey that goes nowhere. And I'm glad to have read it. And unless I have to study it, I'm not going to read it again. But I can see why it's a classic. There's a lot to dive into. It is a commentary on the surreal and absurd and infuriating nature of bureaucracy. And I hated it. I stomped on it. Thank you, Kafka. There was a quote right at the end, which I did highlight because you can see where Kafka was going as well. So page 177 in my edition, which is the very end of this penultimate chapter, in which he's been talking to a priest, and the priest is giving him essentially a parable, a story of someone else, and they're run in with this judicial system, and eventually it comes to the simple story the priest has been telling. The simple story had become perplexing. He wanted to be rid of it. And that far from the end, that's how I was feeling too. Next up was Sistersong by Holland. This was published in 2021, and I bought it because look at that cover. Yep, that cover was the best bit of this story. I did not enjoy it at all. It is a retelling of I don't know if it's Welsh ballad, old British folk ballad, The Twa Sisters, which sounds like it should be Welsh. This one is set in Wales, medieval Wales. The original folk ballad is 2 sisters and a brother, I guess. This is 2 sisters and then the third sibling is a trans man. They love each other in the beginning, and then over the course of the events, jealousy brings them apart, tears them down, separates them from their natural connection to the world. They are the children of the king, and the king has lost his connection to the magic of the world because of Christianity invading. It's set in Wales, and there's always the threat of Saxon invasion. One of the sisters, who is disabled from an injury, she was caught in a fire. She finds herself lost in the woods, and she is rescued by this guy and his mute companion. And this guy is welcomed back into their village because he rescued the princess. And he stays and he falls in love with this sister that he rescued. And she becomes really possessive of this relationship. They're sleeping together, which is obviously not cool because they're not married. And in the process of this relationship, he's gathering data about the village. He's obviously one of the Saxons and they're coming to invade, and he's just found this easy way in to get an idea of what's happening. The younger sister also really likes him, and she had these dreams where they were to be together, and then he turned up and she was like, geez, this is the guy from my literal dreams. So she's really jealous of this sister who's sleeping with him because the younger one considers herself the pretty one. She's got the lovely voice and she's not disfigured from the fire, and of course it should be her. And then there's the brother who, of course, being trans in society, is weird to everybody and has the deepest connection to the magic, and so is an outcast in that way and cuts themselves off from the rest of the family while they work through coming out and living as a man in their village. And then the Saxons invade and shit goes down. They find out that the lover betrayed everybody, not just the older sister, and they have to defend against a Saxon invasion. It's also obvious. It's a retelling of a story of these two sisters who are jealous of each other over this one guy. But here, it just doesn't feel... It feels forced in the way that retellings often feel forced because they have to hit... And historical fiction too. They have to hit the beats of a story that already exists. Every note that it hit was the one that I expected it to hit. So if you're in the mood for a feminist retelling that does everything that you expect a feminist retelling to do, this is fine. It's perfectly cromulent, but I was just bored. In the same way that I was bored with Electra by Jennifer Saint, there's really not much agency you can give Electra, and so the whole thing was plodding along. This one, it was quite obvious what was going to happen, and like I said, it was cromulent, but I wouldn't read it again. There was a bit there, though, where the brother was learning how to use a knife and a sword and that, because obviously assigned female at birth, they weren't taught those skills, being a princess. And so they're learning how to use a sword and a knife, and then a situation comes along where they could use their magic, and then the mage, Taliesin, or Taliesin equivalent, says to them, does not all situations call for magic. Sometimes a pointy object will do just fine. Yes, that is true. I agree with that. Next one was an installment in the Penric and Desdemona novella series by Lois McMaster Bujold on my Kindle. And this is the 12th one. They're all short stories or novellas. And if you're not familiar with Penric and Desdemona, I highly, highly recommend that you get familiar because they are beautiful. I love them. Penric is a guy who accidentally gets a demon. Let me start at the very beginning. A very good place to start. This is set in the world of the Curse of Chalion. So if you're familiar with that, you'll be familiar with the 5 gods, which is what all these books are based in, the world of the 5 gods. And Penric, in this one, he's just minding his own business one day and he runs into a dying lady. She's having a heart attack, I think. And so he sits with her while she's dying, and her parting gift to him is the demon that's inside her. And Penric was not expecting this gift. And so that makes him immediately a sorcerer, but also a threat because he needs to have the training to control the demon so that the demon doesn't ascend in his body and take over his body and cause chaos. They're literally demons formed out of chaos. And so that happens and it's all good, and he and his demon, who he has named Desdemona, get along just fine. 12 episodes in, Penric and Desdemona are summoned to a nearby town because a girl has washed up on shore and things are randomly setting on fire around her, which indicates that she probably has a demon too. So they go to sort out what's going on with this girl, and she's only young. She's like 6 or 7. Penric also has a daughter a similar age, and the demon is newly formed as well. It was on a rat, newly formed, and now it's in this girl. So it's a baby demon as well. So Penric has parental feelings towards this girl, and Desdemona has parental feelings towards the demon in this girl, which is weird for demons. They don't usually like each other. But I think from that you can see where this is going, and it's all very sweet and very nice, and it's lovely to spend time with Penric and Desdemona and their family in this world. And like I said, highly recommend you get on board with this series because it's gorgeous. Oh, and I read it as soon as it came out, published 2024. This one, published 1897, is Dracula by Bram Stoker. This one I picked up for an English class that I'm doing, and I loved it. I was so shocked at how much I enjoyed this book, and I think you should read it if you haven't, because it is a pacey horror thriller page turner that feels very modern. It starts out, and honestly, you know the story already, or you know most of it from pop culture, so it wouldn't have hurt to fill in the blanks. So it starts out with Jonathan Harker travelling to Transylvania to do some solicitor work for this Count Dracula, and then weird shit goes down. And all of the story is told in like diary entries and letters, and there's train timetables in there and official correspondence between businesses. And I think that's what makes it feel modern, is it's the personal POVs of people rather than, and then this happened and then that happened and then she said that. So anyway, Jonathan Harker gets trapped in Transylvania, and his fiance is back in England, and then Dracula ends up in England, and then shenanigans, spooky vampire shenanigans ensue. And I have to admit, when I got to the bit where Professor Dr. Van Helsing turned up, I'm like, oh shit, Van Helsing is actually not just a shit movie and a shit League of Extraordinary Gentlemen character. He's actually in this book too, doing stuff to defeat Dracula. I think it's a product of its time in that all the female characters, even though they get POVs in their diary entries, are fawning over the men, and even when they're dying from the vampires, they're still praising the men for the work that they've done and ignoring the symptoms of being attacked by vampires and just assuming everything's fine until it is literally not fine. So I didn't enjoy that part, but the rest of it was really pacey when they all have to like travel back to Transylvania in pursuit of Dracula and ultimately defeat him. I'm sorry, that's spoilers. So yeah, pick it up. It's quite long, but I did read some of this, but I had a copy on an app called Audrey. I won this in a competition on Storygraph, and Audrey is an app where they take classics and present it chapter by chapter, and then they do like an interpretive thing for each chapter. So this one was, we start with Jonathan Harker travelling to Transylvania, and then the interpretive thing is talking about the Carpathians, which is the mountains of Transylvania where Dracula lives, and trying to get you to do the work of thinking about English literature in that, what does this place actually look like? What are the implications of this? This is where he travelled. How would you feel? Like trying to do that critical thinking work. But also the performance was great, so I recommend that. I will put a link to Audrey below. Like I said, I won the copy of Dracula in a competition, but I would definitely buy more. In fact, they said they're bringing out Ulysses this year, and I think that's the way that I'm going to eventually read Ulysses, is through the Audrey app and interpretation. Let's move on though. Bouncing from Dracula, which I really, really, really enjoyed, to Frankenstein, which I could not wait to be over. I don't have a physical copy yet. It's still in the mail. It is also something I needed to read for this uni subject, but I listened to it because I didn't have time to wait for the physical copy. And oh my God, so bad. So Frankenstein came out in this version, 1818. Frankenstein or the Modern Prometheus is the full title, and it's by Mary Shelley. You know the story of Frankenstein, and I suggest that you leave it at that because you will gain nothing from reading this book. It's a story within a story frame. So it starts out, this guy, he's on this voyage of science, and he's whinging to his sister in his letters that he doesn't have a friend. And then they pick up this guy off the ice, and he's like, I empathize with you, brother, but this is what happens when you're lonely and you make a friend. And then he tells the story. This is Frankenstein that's picked up off the ice. And he tells the story about how he had an idyllic life and he went to university and he discovered how to animate a corpse, essentially. He built the corpse. And he built it on a larger scale so that it was easier to do the intricate parts. And then Frankenstein brings this creature to life and immediately has regrets and runs away and has a mental breakdown. And the creature is left in the world, not knowing anything, not having a cultural background, not having any knowledge of anything, just having to survive and being screamed at by everyone because it just looks scary as. So we have that story of Frankenstein. He has this mental breakdown. He goes home, and just before he goes home, his little brother is murdered. And he knows that it was this creature that did it. Then we switch to Frankenstein and the creature meet up, and the creature tells his story, and oh my God, it's just waffly whinging and just too neat, too pat, too convenient. And then he's like, well, nobody likes me and Frankenstein won't talk to me, so I'm going to kill his brother and kill all his family. And Frankenstein's like, that's rude. And the creature's like, well, make me a mate, make me a woman, and we'll go off and do stuff and leave you alone. And Frankenstein's like, no. And the creature's like, if you don't do this, I'm going to murder everyone. So Frankenstein agrees to make a mate for the creature. But he has all these doubts, which is the main themes of the book, is what are the implications of making a life and then not supporting that life? What are the implications of making another creature and then that creature doesn't want to hang out with the first one? They don't want to mate. They don't want babies. What if they do have babies? And I think that's an excellent commentary on parenting in general. But ultimately, Frankenstein doesn't make another mate. The creature kills all his family, and then they live the rest of their days, the creature running and Frankenstein chasing him. And in doing that, neither of them are participating in society. Both of them are miserable. And eventually this happens till Frankenstein is picked up on their ship and dies. And then the creature comes along and he's like, oh, what a noble gentleman. I've ruined his life. I'm going to go die now. So now you don't have to read that book. Like I said, you know all about it from pop culture already. And at least I can say that it's done, and we'll see how much I have to actually study this book for this course. The thing is, in terms of uni, it's really easy to write about a bad book rather than a good book. So I've got that going for me. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's 5. So I'm going to end on my little rant there, and I will see you next time. Bye.